Welcome to our first training session on World Schools Debate. Tonight's topic is, what is World Schools Debate? And if you're viewing this recording or this training session live, you know that we are going to just cover the basic understanding of what this event is. On Tuesday night, we will have a session on how you might write cases or work with your students on writing cases. And on Wednesday afternoon or evening, we're having a session about what are points of information. Next week, we'll offer 2 more training sessions, which we will determine topics after getting some feedback from these sessions this week. If you have questions about during the session, feel free to ask questions, and we will stop along the way to try to answer those for you. The first thing would be to really give you a definition of World Schools Debate. I'm Gail Hyde. I was one of the coaches that took students to the national tournament this last year from North Dakota. Jake Thomas from Mandan was the other coach, and he will be doing the session on Wednesday night about points of information. World Schools Debate is a unique debate event, different from other U.S. forms of debate, where students are asked to have both prepared topics and do impromptu topics. So ahead of the tournament, your students will prepare topics or cases on topics that are released, which we'll talk about the ones for November and December in just a minute. And then at the tournament, they'll have an opportunity to take an hour of preparation time with just the team in the room doing a preparation for that topic, and then they go in and debate that topic. So it's unique in that the other forms of debate, you already know the topics before you get there. Public forum debate, Lincoln-Douglas debate. There's no impromptu versions or impromptu rounds in those events. Where in World Schools Debate, students need to have a depth of knowledge in a variety of topics, and especially critical thinking skills, so that they can determine or create cases together as a team. When you're thinking about who might be good World Schools debaters, you may think that you need to have a debate program at your school, or you might think that you need to have really strong extempors. And although debate students with background in debate, or students in background in extemp speaking, certainly, or impromptu, certainly would be good candidates, our team that we took to the national tournament last year consisted of orators, student Congress students, debaters, impromptu extemp speakers, as well as humorous interpreters, oratory, or persuade speakers. There was a need to have a well-rounded way to view the world. And so really we looked for students who had an understanding of what's going on in the world, had an interest in public events or current events. They might be students who had a good way to wordsmith things in the round, so that when they're working on those impromptu cases, they had an ability to create a case, because there's no coach in those rounds where they're preparing those impromptu. So think a little bit out of the box as you think about people who might be on your team or in your school that might be good candidates for World Schools Debate. If you're a speech coach and you say, this is just too much for me, I can't do another thing of preparation, think about other teachers in your school who might be able to coach a team. It's very much like doing Quiz Bowl or any other kind of current event kinds of impromptu kinds of debate or questioning. And maybe a social studies teacher or an English teacher who is not you would like to take this on. The teams consist of anywhere from 3 to 5 students. You may have a team of 3, or you may have 4 or 5 students who are interested in doing this. You can have as many teams as you would like. And so it's a good activity for many different individuals. Hello, Sandy. Thank you for joining us. I started and I am recording this session. So feel free to interrupt and ask questions as you might have them. Can you hear me, Sandy? Okay, just making sure. You're muted right now, so if you have questions, you'll want to unmute your microphone, okay? Just for a little background for me, you were at our World Schools session, is that right? Okay, so a lot of what I'm going to talk about tonight is what we talked about at that World Schools session, since it's really background for people who maybe didn't make it to that session. So feel free to interrupt and ask questions though along the way, because I know it was fast that day as well. It'll be fairly fast tonight. So all I've done so far is just preface what kinds of students you might want to choose when you are choosing World Schools debaters, okay? So with all of that and just some basic understanding of the format, there's 3 students that will debate at a time. So even if you have 5 students on your team, only 3 are in the debate round actually debating. The other 2 sit in the audience. They're not allowed to interact with those students during the actual round. They're not allowed to like find evidence for them or anything like that. They sit where the judges would sit and are not part of the round in the rounds that they are not debating. When we did this at the national tournament, we just made sure that students ahead of time knew which rounds they were going to be debating in terms of the preparation. So for instance, we have 2 prepared topics. So if you have 5 students, you might have 3 that know they're going to debate one of the topics, and one of those would repeat and 2 others would be in the other prepared topic, so that they know ahead of time when we're doing this topic, we're going to be debating. When we're doing this topic, we're going to be debating. We found that it was best to let the kids make that decision in the impromptu rounds. So as they're working, it kind of in an organic way kind of presents itself as to which of the 3 out of the 5 might be the best to do that particular round. So if you have 5 students, it becomes a little trickier because you have to decide who's actually going to debate. If you have 3 students, then obviously they're debating every single round and they're working together each of those rounds as well. One of the components of World Schools debate that you have to think a little bit about is research. And if you've been around debate rounds, you know that debate tends to be really heavy in research, which is not the case in World Schools debate. World Schools debate relies much more heavily on student logic and critical thinking and analysis of the issue. So yes, you want to have some research. But for instance, one of our topics at the national tournament was an agriculture topic and eliminating agricultural subsidies. Our students in North Dakota, of course, had a lot of experience with this idea, and they came up with a lot of analogies where they used information about farmers they actually knew that would be impacted by withdrawing or maintaining the agricultural subsidies, and they used a lot of that as their backup in their case. They also had hard evidence of things that they looked up on resources through the internet or through databases, but you know, to keep in mind that it's very much about critical thinking and analysis of the issue, and which is a nice another thing that's different to decide which one. We made a decision to have an almanac in that room because we felt like it had a lot more opportunity for different kinds of information depending on what they might hit as a topic, because you just don't know that going in. But if you have a really good 1-volume encyclopedia in your library, you could bring that along. It doesn't need to be something you go out and purchase. And then they can have a dictionary, which our students found to be really helpful because it helped them be able to define some terms in the resolution so that they could use those words to their advantage as they started to think about those cases. So those impromptu rounds, really there isn't any research. It's all about them and thinking and what they need to think about, okay? And so it is different from traditional debate because of that. The tournament progresses through a proposition and opposition format. So it's a little bit like thinking about the House of Commons, or in England, if you've ever watched a movie even, where they have people in the House of Commons and they talk about this house believes this, or the opposition party. So whenever the proposition will always be the position of this house believes that. So it will always be about the government's position toward that position, and the opposition would be the people that would be voting against that. So the structure is that you have an opposition speaker 1, a proposition speaker 1, and an opposition speaker 1, followed by another proposition speaker and an opposition speaker, followed by a third proposition speaker and opposition speaker. And then there's a little rebuttal at the end. Those first 6 speeches are all 8 minutes long. The last 2 are only 4 minutes long. I'm going to flip up part of a PowerPoint here just so that we can see this structure a little bit. Let's see if I can find my PowerPoint. Nope, let's see if I can find it. I think this is what I want. Let me get to the page I need to be on so that you can see what I'm talking about. We've talked a little bit about this already. There are some of our kids. So we talked about this at the proposition and the opposition. And let me get to the time limits is what I want. So you can see here what I'm talking about with time structure. So you've got 8 minutes for these first 6 speeches, and this last 2 are 4 minutes. These are 3 different people: speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3. The opposition speaker is one of these 3, but it cannot be the 3rd speaker. It can be speaker 1 or speaker 2. It cannot be speaker 3. So you think about which student is maybe best at wrapping up, and then you want to make sure that they are taking those positions. If you look at the information on the side, there is protected time in these speeches. You'll notice there's no prep time. In a traditional debate round, there would be prep time after each speech or when the debaters decided to take it. There is no prep time. Once the debate starts, the debate just keeps going until it ends. But students can stand up from the other side and say that they have a point of information, okay? And they stand up and just say point of information. The other side decides, the side that's speaking decides, do I want to take that point of information or not? And so the tradition or the culture is that a team, an opposition team questioning the proposition, so the proposition speaking, opposition is offering points of information, might offer anywhere from 4 to 6 points of information. The proposition team who is speaking would try to take at least 2 to 3 of those. So they're not expected to answer every one of those questions. They can answer them as they think it will help their position on their side, okay? Or they don't want to be interrupted right then. They can say no. So we'll talk more about this on Wednesday when Jake does his points of information speech, but they literally just wave that opponent down, and that person has to sit down because you're not going to take their question. So points of information are just for helping with clarity in the debate round. So they might, you actually can even make statements. So I'm a proposition speaker and I'm speaking. The opposition could stand up and make a statement as the point of information if I let them. But I could say, no, you're not going to do that, okay? Does that make sense, kind of? So those points of information interrupt these speeches. They cannot interrupt the reply speeches. Those reply speeches are for the debaters to decide, here's what we're covering, and this is why we think that you should vote our way. Here's what we thought, and wrap up that part of the debate. Okay, so they're, in traditional debate language, we might call them rebuttal speeches, but really they're more than rebuttal speeches because they're wrap up. They're not like just debating against the other side. The first 3 speeches also have a variety of kind of speaker positions that you want in each one of those speeches. And on Tuesday night, when we talk about case construction, we'll go more in depth into that, because tonight I just want to make sure everybody understands what World Schools is and how it works. Okay. Let me see what makes it up. So here's, in World Schools, one of the things that is different is that you are not just grading what arguments they made. So as a judge, each team I have to give 100 points to. They're going to get 40% for style, 40% for what they had to say, and 20% for strategy. So just having arguments and evidence is only going to be worth 40%. So they have to, that's why I said at the beginning of this, before Sandy entered our session, that you might consider having interpreters, Or you might consider just having smart kids in your school who aren't in speech at all. Or, you know, kids that have some passion, because that style component is a pretty heavy part of the ballot. 20% for strategy, that's about how well did we determine how we should argue against the other team. That's part of that strategy. What did we do as we thought about it? I talk to my kids, our kids, about what's your theme? What's your thesis in this debate? What are you going to really focus on? And then their strategy would be to always be bringing that thesis back up. Okay? So there are 4 speeches for each team. They have to be delivered with passion. They have to be delivered with some poise and professionalism. The teams who focus only on debate style will not be very successful. So people that don't have debaters shouldn't be afraid of that, because frankly, you're probably at an advantage, because kids who are coming out of traditional debate are not in the mindset of style and in the round. They're in the mindset of substance and strategy, but the style is not something they're used to having to worry about. Even student Congress kids, I would say, need to really be coached into that passion in that style version, which our interpreters tend to understand fairly quickly. So it's nice to have an interpreter on the team. Okay. Please interrupt if you have questions. Okay. Another thing that makes World Schools Debate different is the idea of the points of information, which I talked a little bit about. And I said on Tuesday night, Jake is going to really talk in depth about how you use points of information in the round, why they're not scary things that kids should be afraid of. But it does help if you have done some points of information work with your students before they come to the tournament, because they get thrown off a little when you see the other team standing up. They don't quite know how to deal with that. So it's good to practice that with them, and just, even if it's you and the 3 kids on the other side and you stand up and pretend to ask them questions, it helps them to kind of see how that's going to work. We talked about prep time. If you know anything about policy debate has plans. And this is not what World Schools Debate is, but they do say that if you can think of a way that you might have a mechanism or a model that you could say, here's how my plan would work. We would have the Department of Agriculture be disbanded so that they don't give out subsidies, or whatever it might be, and then talk about what the impact of that disbanding would be. Does that make some sense? So it's not really saying create a plan, but if you have a model that we could think about, a little bit like a policy case would be. And when we talk about case construction on Tuesday, I'm going to cover that more in depth, because that takes quite a little while to kind of talk about what each of those elements are. I suppose I can't back up here. Let's see. Okay, so in our North Dakota World Schools, these are the 3 that we're offering. November 20th and 21st at Mandan. Now, that first tournament, none of us have thought about it. None of us, I mean, we're looking at that as let's practice what it looks like to run a World Schools Debate tournament. So we're not starting till 5 o'clock with judge training. There will be a couple of rounds on Friday night. I sent out that schedule, so if you didn't get it, let me know. But I know my students aren't going to really be ready, but we're looking at it as more of a workshop-y kind of tournament. Frankly, it's that way for LD and PF as well, because it's the first tournament of the year. So, and on Friday, only World Schools kids will be at that site. So it's all about World Schools on Friday. And then we'll offer it again at South on the 11th and 12th. The 29th and 30th, the plan is to have it in the Fargo area. But if somebody wanted to step up and say, hey, we'll do it at our school, we can talk about whether or not that would be a better option. But right now, these 2 would be planned in the Fargo area. Let me get out of this and quit sharing my desktop. Got to figure out what I'm doing. Okay, so I've been talking for about 30 minutes. Do you have questions, Sandy? Because you're the only participant in the room. Do you have things you just want to know about with World Schools? You need to turn your microphone on, though, because you're muted. Oh, you can't get it on? There's a chat. Let me open chat. Do you see the chat on the side of your, do you see us play, or at the bottom of your window? If you kind of hover your mouse. Nothing? Oh, so if you want to type a question. She's like, Gail, it's really late. If you want me to type. Okay. Oh, okay. I just want to make sure that we've covered what, you know, like just the background of what it is and how we do it. Does that, is it making sense what it, how it functions? I mean, do you have questions about how would I choose a team? How would I find research? Where would I go to find a template? What are the topics? I could share those with you. Yes, we sent them out, but here they are too. But my print is really big because it, let's see if it goes up there. Okay, so the first one is, the first prepared topic will be, this House believes that a government should prioritize the humanitarian needs of refugees over its national interests. That's about the Syrian crisis, right? I would tell you that in November, this was the public forum topic. Or no, it might have been even September, October. But there's a ton of research that's already like cut handbook kind of research. I would be careful about using too much of that because you don't want to get your kids so heavy into research, because that's going to be, I mean, into like, I'm going to provide evidence in my case. But it might be a place to get some ideas about how you talk about this topic as a coach. So just so you know that exists out there. The other one is, this House believes that the Common Core is in the best interest of students. And so obviously the negative would be, no, the Common Core isn't in the best interest of students because blah, 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 whatever it might be. Math, the math parts of it are too complicated and strange and not able to do it. It's too much rigor, or it causes too much time spent on the Common Core, and things like Spanish get left behind, right? So we felt like there was a lot of research on both those topics. We obviously have not picked impromptu topics yet because Jake and I, as we're working with our students, don't want to really know what those are, right? Because we don't want to accidentally say, oh, this might be an idea, you know, and then we've disadvantaged people because we're coaching and running the topics. So I can't even give you a hint about impromptu topics because we haven't picked them. We may even pick them on Friday, the tournament. So, but for now, those are the prepared topics. Oh, and that was your question too. Are the impromptu topics unknown? Yes, the impromptu topics will be different at each of the tournaments as well. So what we use in November, we won't use in December. But these two prepared will be the same for November and December. We just felt like because November is going to be pretty practicey, and there are a lot of people who can't make it in November. So we, you know, that was some feedback from that session at C-Stand, and so that's what we decided to do. There are not topic areas for that impromptu because they can be just silly, you know, like the one about Disney World, if you remember that example, the Disney, oh, let me see if I can find it in the PowerPoint from the national tournament because I can't remember. Oh, here. This house believes Disney does more harm than good for children. You know, so it's that kind of a topic. It's not going to be anything that's going to be hugely research intense, you know, like that they would have to have a lot of knowledge to be able to answer. or pretty common, like I could see us doing one about the election, something about the candidates in the election, because, or maybe like the Republican and Democratic debates inform the public, and so then they could talk about why it does or doesn't, something more general like that, if it's a current events kind of question. Does that help? Okay. Three, I think, impromptu routes. Let me find the schedule. I'll tell it to you. Let me pull it up out of my drive. I could talk, I guess, while I'm pulling it up, but that's not it. World schools. This is it. I know you can still see me, but oh. On my end, it looks like everything's frozen. Sorry, for a second I froze. Everything just, was I frozen for you too? Everything just disappeared for a second, so sorry about that. Okay, let's see if I can, I'm still trying to find that because it all froze up on me and I couldn't see. Here we go, is this it? Nope. Because I'm looking for it, Sandy, I can't find it quickly, but I will locate it and send it to you. What was I looking for? I can't remember now. Oh, what the schedule. That's what it was. Okay. We sent that out in an email with through I don't know if it was through NDHSAA email, I think, but let me I thought of where else it is here. Just let me. November, December World Schools Debate. I just found it. Give me a second to get it up, and then I will paste it into the chat. So there it is. So Friday, we'll have a 5 to 5:30 judge training. They'll do their first prepared resolution at 5:30 to 6:30. We'll prep an impromptu and do one. So they'll do one prepared and one impromptu on Friday night. And then on Saturday, we'll start with an impromptu in the morning, partly because if we need to do any retraining of judges, that can happen in that time that the kids are working on impromptu. So if people have questions or we felt like the ballots didn't really reflect what we wanted them to, whatever, we can do a little retraining again. And then we'll do the second prepared topic and then the third. So we'll do 3 impromptu and 2 prepared. Okay. And then awards will follow. That schedule on Saturday fits in with the PF and LD schedule so that we can do awards all together at the end of the day. And remember, there's no entry fee. You just have to bring a judge with a team, with 2 teams. You can have 2 teams for 1 judge. So. I don't know if I put a registration deadline on. It usually like the Tuesday before the tournament, it would be nice to have that information by then. If you think you're going to come, maybe just send me an email saying, yeah, we're working on trying to get a team together. I'm just not positive yet. So that, is that kind of where you're at? You're just kind of thinking about, you might be able to be there on that. Okay. So, and if I figure out when I'm working with our World Schools kids, I would open up a Zoom like this and your kids could be there while I'm working with my kids. I just don't know yet because we're just starting debate on Monday. So I haven't figured out a schedule of when the World Schools kids will work with me and whether or not that time would even work to let other people watch what we're doing, or if I just record it and people can watch it later to see how I'm prepping our kids. But I mean, I don't think there's any big secrets. I'm not worried about somebody's going to see what I'm doing, you know. I just think the event's really cool and would like to see more people try it. So I think our Zoom is going to close in about 10 minutes because it only works for 40 minutes on the free version. So we have about 10 minutes to wrap up anything else you can think of that you might want to know now. Otherwise, obviously, I'll put my email here. You know it, I think, Sandy, but other people might not. So that you could always email me with a question. And I think I've put that email on all the things that I've sent out. So if people have questions. The event is a hybrid of debate and persuade, really is what it is. You know, it's a very just conversational style. There's tons of videos online of international teams debating. So the hard part there is sometimes the accent gets a little hard to understand because of that, and to realize these are teams that are top-rated World Schools teams a lot of times, so they're not like what our kids are going to look like. You know, like I had to say to our kids, don't freak out when you see this, but at least it gave them an idea of what World Schools looks like as a complete round. You know, there's also some, I know there's some exhibition World Schools videos for NFL schools, but I don't know if you would have access to those. I just don't know if the link would work for a non-NFL school. Are you typing something to me, or are you just writing something to yourself? Oh, okay. I was trying to decide if I was supposed to watch the chat. Okay, so this video will be up, so if you want to review anything we talked about, I'll send out a link to this and maybe a link to a couple of sites that maybe, if I find a good video that will be one for you guys to watch, I'll put a link in for that too. Okay? Great. Hopefully your mic works next time. So, okay, great. Have a good night.